Treasury Secretary and economic advisor to many Democratic presidents. Larry Summers, thank you so much for joining me. Mr. Secretary, you have been predicting high inflation since last year. It is at 8.6%, the highest since December of 1981. Has it peaked or could it climb even higher?
Depends on President Putin and what happens with oil prices. There's a risk that it will rise higher, and I don't think it's likely to fall back very, very rapidly. I think the Fed's forecasts have tended to be much too optimistic there, and I hope they'll recognize fully the gravity of the problem in their forecasts when they meet this week.
This weekend, gas prices did reach a stunning national average, $5 a gallon. Is there anything more the Biden administration can actually do to bring those prices down?
Not a lot. It's the gas price piece of this is driven by the geopolitical developments around Ukraine. It's hypocrisy in the extreme when people need to say we need to stand strongly with Ukraine and then blame the administration for the fact that gas prices are higher than they were a year ago. I've been disappointed by some of the almost demagogic statements that have been made in that regard. I think there are things we can do about inflation. The president said something very important, did something very important when he met with Chairman Powell and underscored his respect for the independence of the Fed and made clear he thinks the Fed needs to do whatever is necessary, even if it's painful, to reduce inflation. I've advocated that we need a much more strategic tariff policy vis-a-vis China that takes tariffs down and therefore takes prices down for American consumers and for producers.
Should those tariffs be lifted?
Many of them should be. Many of them should be. We should focus on what's important, not raising input prices for American producers so they're less competitive, which is what much of those tariffs do. Instead, we should be focusing on things that allow the leakage of key technologies to China and the like. We should pass, at long last, some kind of legislation, ideally on a bipartisan basis, that would raise the vastly excessive Trump tax cuts, join the world in taxing corporations adequately, take down prescription drug prices. All of that would operate to reduce inflation. So there are things we can do. And Dana, if I can step out of my area for one second, I think the banana Republicans who are saying that what happened on January 6th was nothing or okay are undermining the basic credibility of our country's institutions. And that in turn feeds through for inflation. Because if you can't trust the country's government, why should you trust its money? So I think it's terribly important that we take the temperature down in Washington, that we recognize behavior that's just out of bounds of reasonable and decency. We give the Fed the room it needs. We bring down the budget deficit. We take down prices directly through prescription drugs. This is a challenge that we can meet if we're prepared to be serious about taking it on.
Secretary Yellen, who has the job you once had, said this week that, quote, there is nothing to suggest a recession is in the works. Do you agree with that?
No, I don't.
You think a recession is in the works?
I think that when inflation is as high as it is right now and unemployment is as low as it is right now, it's almost always been followed within 2 years by inflation, by recession. I look at what's happening in the stock and bond markets. I look at where consumer sentiment is. I think there's certainly a risk of recession in the next year. And I think given where we've gotten to, it's more likely than not that we'll have a recession within the next 2 years. That is something we can manage. We've had them for the whole history of the country. We need to be prepared and to respond quickly if and when it happens. But I think the optimists were wrong a year ago in saying we'd have no inflation, and I think they're wrong now if anyone's highly confident that we're going to avoid recession.
Secretary Summers, thank you so much for joining me. Appreciate it.